Hey folks, Steve here with another Axis Empires Ultimate Edition video. This is going to be the introduction, part 0, for the Divine Wind 1944 campaign in Daisenso. So I believe I have set things up, at least to a degree that I will accept, warts and all. What makes this particular playthrough a bit more special is that we are indeed using Schiffskrieg, which is a whole other rule book to concern ourselves with. So, yeah, Schiffskrieg, and just to show, it's a fair bit of stuff to add on, but the rules themselves really aren't that much more. Because that book contains additional setup information, lookup rules that we don't necessarily need to read right away, um, and all kinds of goodness there. And well, let me tell you, it's going to be an interesting run here. I do think, for the purposes of the Japanese, using Schiffskrieg is much more interesting in the 41, 42 time period because they've got the ability to kind of punch and make some maybe dramatic impacts and avoid historical disasters like Midway. But still, I think this 1944, late war scenario should make for an interesting one to play, and it's going to give us a sizable amount of time to play. So right now, the VJ victory against Japan Day, victory in Japan, that marker is in November, December 1945. So we have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 turns potentially, or longer, as the case may go. And if we compare just the look of the map and how much red is spread all over the place compared to our Tora, we can definitely see that a number of actions over time will have occurred along the historical narrative. The Kwangtung in the north in Manchukuo is holding a very thin line against a border that contains a lot of Russians. Now, the Russians don't come in until August, September, the autumn turn of 1945. But that's something we're going to have to keep an eye on. We're just going to have to know, like, hey, we're going to end up fighting the Russians. I've got to defend some strategic hexes up there. It might not take much for the Soviets to just run in there and gobble them up. There is, I think it's, what is it, Harbin? Yeah, Harbin. We've got Daiken, which is also known as Port Arthur in certain time periods. And then we've got the capital in Korea up there, which is also a strategic hex that we'd have to worry about. So lots of concern there. We also have a pretty large commitment of Japanese forces in northern China. We have some throughout southern China. We still have holdings in Indochina. You're here against the Yunnan province of China, or the Yunnan minor country of China. The battles of Burma and India are ongoing at the gates of Imphal and not too terribly far from uh, Dhaka, with Japanese forces kind of, I think, outmatched in Burma there, potentially, but there is a chance that Japanese maybe could try to push through and make a difference, but certainly some kind of stalemate there. The Japanese continue to hold the Dutch East Indies, or the Netherlands East Indies. I feel like Dutch East Indies just flows off my tongue better. I don't know. Easier to say for some reason. Still control the Philippines, but then what should be noted here, and I'll explain these big stacks of units in a second, that the Allied sort of main counteroffensive uh, is in work. Whether we're talking, South Pacific, Central Pacific, there are advances being made. The Allies are uh, consolidating control over Papua, at least the British side of it, with the Japanese holding out in Wewak. Uh, but you can see the Allies now sort of getting closer and closer to Rabaul by a land connection. They're right next to it. Coming up the Solomon Islands, there are some units here in the Solomons and a cluster of Japanese forces right around Rabaul. So that's a strategic hex. The Japanese would like to hold that as long as they can basically. I guess that's the thing, as long as they can. Um, but the South Pacific offensive of the Allies is potent and will very likely succeed eventually, however long that looks like. We also have the Central Pacific advance, so the Allies, the Americans firmly in place in Inuiatok and the Marshall Islands. They have their Servron marker, which I forget what that stands for. I would know it as like the uh, service fleet thing that would be in World in Flames, basically the same thing, allowing us to turn one of these ports into a major port. And so the Allies have a bunch of ships here, and that's to help drive. I think we would historically bypass Truk and go for Saipan, which is here, Iwo Jima beyond it, and then Okinawa and beyond from that perspective. So, the Allies kind of have their main axes of advance. Uh, I will point out that, yes, there is a British fleet still out in Ceylon at the moment. Maybe could have, maybe should have been set up somewhere else. I don't know. What we're trying to make sure we do, and I don't know how, I don't know what to expect in a campaign like this in this game. It's not as though I've not like played war games in this kind of situation. Just that, again, the unique way that Axis Empires works, especially with Schiffskrieg, kind of makes it like I don't know what I'm going to be able to do. I might surprise myself in the opportunities that present themselves. So I got to think through some of those things. So the thought being, the British need to keep a fleet out there in the West to contest any surprise Japanese attempts to disrupt India and to help support the Allied offensives into Burma, because we do want to take Rangoon back because it is a strategic hex. Um, so let's talk about victory for a second, because this is a flavor of a campaign game, technically. The victory conditions are just what the main campaign victory conditions would be, which is the Allies need to eventually come out on top on victory point uh, calculation. The game, the core rule book, and I don't know, several places in the rules um, point out that in game terms, Dicenso in a vacuum, they consider, again, in game terms, not in like, you know, real terms, the Axis player won, because the Axis tied marker was in the 2 victory point spot when the Japanese mandate marker went down. So basically, the Axis will get 2 victory points. That's where they stuck their flag. And then the Allies historically achieved Allied Crusade 2 victory points, which means in terms of victory points, it was a tie. Ties go to the Axis. The Axis technically won out on that one. Which is a very interesting thing to posit. I think, a lot of other World War II games just say like, well, you factor in the A bomb or something into the victory calculation, and the Allies win that way. This game just handles just a little bit different, and sort of much like the Great Crusade scenario we played in Totaler the Allies are on the offensive. The tempo is set by them, and what they need to do is basically roll back the Axis to achieve victory. And they're on a timer. We've only got so much time, or else we fail. And to be clear, for us to win, we're gonna to win outright. The Allies need to achieve Allied Crusade 3 victory points with Allied Crusade, which means the strategic value calculation needs to be at least -9. So we think about how we're going to do that. Well, we're going to reduce control that Japan has on green, or well, I guess green is the only one that really matters, I guess, right now. Green strategic hexes, and then deprive them of control, or really the Allies take control of gray strategic hexes. And we'll start to shift that all the way from where we're at now, which let's calculate that really quick before we talk about much more, because I think victory is really what drives the whole campaign. The Japanese have one, two, three, four, five, six, seven. Make sure I got that. So seven green strategic hexes under their control. The Allies have, I believe it's one gray victory hex under control in Iwitak. And Witak, I'm going to say that wrong. I don't know. That's a gray strategic hex that the Americans have control of. So we're down to, I believe, a +6. I might need to double check and look around the map, make sure I'm not missing one. There's a player aid chart for this, but I don't seem to want to grab it. I'm doing it myself, I guess. Um, so they're at +6. So we're not far from bumping them down to Axis Tide 1. And really just as much and as soon as we're capable, we're going to want to shift things into Allied Crusade, because that will make the delay DRMs really hurt the Japanese. And even right now, that 2 victory point is just, basically trying to offset the Axis delay DRM coming from the U.S. commitment level, which is 2, just like it was in our Great Crusade to Tower Creek scenario. So kind of a similar feel. The Axis has an okay delay die roll modifier, but over time we're going to see that collapse, and the Allies just really enjoy probably good die rolls throughout and allow them to take things. So you think about like what kind of advancements can we make? Um, I think clearly there's a need to take Rabaul. If we can get Truck, that'd be nice. We're gonna want to get Saipan. We're gonna get Iwo Jima. We're gonna get Okinawa. There's a whole thing related to the Japanese home islands that we'll cover in the video later on. But like the European theater stuff matters there a little bit, so I may have to look at that. But that's something like we're either going to have to land in Japan maybe to make up a difference if we're not doing well, or yeah, we're going to want to drop some bomb markers and cause devastation in Japan to get technical control of those strategic hexes for victory. Whether or not we're going to be able to relieve China, that's kind of up in the air. The Japanese forces in China may just eventually peter out, and that will allow us maybe some breakthroughs and reclaim uh, Wuhan, certainly, maybe Taiping. The British will probably want to jump into Hong Kong with some kind of naval action or something eventually. And that's really the key thing, just like with the Great Crusade, where, hook by crook, the strategic hexes are what matters. So if we're going to leapfrog in the Pacific and we end up bypassing Truk because we feel we don't need it, or it's not as important to grab, like we can certainly look at that and do that, and well, we'll see how it goes. Um, should point out, okay, we're playing with Schiffskrieg, so what's all that about? That's new. Um, well, there's a whole set of components for Schiffskrieg. There is a sort of fleet ship display where you can get rid of these big gigantic stacks that I have on the map and put a different kind of marker there. That's fine. I don't think I may not end up using them because I'm gonna work with the big stacks one way or another. Probably to my regret, because I'm gonna knock something over. There's also a special shipbuilding track, so I'll eventually show more of that in a little bit, or later in the video, or probably in part 1 when we actually do the shipbuilding phase. But basically, during the early parts of the game, meaning pre-war, limited war, each faction is going to get some shipbuilding points based on die rolls. I kind of don't like that. Like, oh, well, maybe I'm going to roll like crap and I just don't get to build ships as Japan. Like that seems bizarre. And then the Americans get like freebies later that get three shipbuilding points where everyone else is rolling just to get one. I guess that kind of makes sense in terms of scale of production, but the fact that you can like, I don't know, let's say it's Japan, you just roll badly, you're not you're not building the Japanese carriers very fast. That feels a bit odd to me. So I don't know if I'd like that, but anyway, there is a whole process. You begin building ships; they take a long time, as you would expect, and there's a whole little sub mechanic there to treat uh, and deal with. But eventually, you get those ships, and you're going to put them in bases. Your air units that accompany your air fleet support units, um, or Air Force, I should say, Air Force support units, are similarly based on the map. And so the way this really works is like you're basically saying, hey, at this port, I'm going to have all these units available to form task forces. So when we go to place a support marker, a surface fleet or carrier fleet or whatever, the type of marker that you're using still matters. So, like, what can you do with a carrier fleet? Well, you can turn it into a carrier strike, and that has certain benefits. Well, you can still do that with the support marker, but whether or not the support marker stays on the map to do that comes down to your naval air battle. Now, if an opponent opposes your marker placement with their own marker, instead of them just going poof into the delay box, instead you will have a battle that will take place. And usually, what I suspect is going to happen, at least until something kind of really breaks, is the combat will probably attrit both sides to a certain degree. Ships will be destroyed, disabled, sunk, damaged, whatever. And then the markers still go to the delay box. So there's sort of like, are you really getting much out of it? But the way at the tail end of the battle, things can go a bit differently where the defender may get to retain their support marker. The attacker can basically send a marker, exhaust the defender's ships or markers that they have nearby, and then play another marker just like you would in the standard game. And maybe the defender doesn't have any ships left, even if they have a support unit marker. There's no point in trying to contest the second marker because you can't, because you just don't have the ships for it. And that's something that is a different way that things can go, a different nuance to the system. So we're going to see just kind of what some of this looks like and what's the point of it all. Is it worthwhile? I think folks that have play tested this or played with it before, like if you could go look at comments on Board Game Geek and other places, there are people who are saying, always play with Schiffskrieg now. It's that much better. And others saying, well, I really like it, but I still will play most of the time without it. Kind of an interesting thing, and it reminds me a bit of World in Flames and optional rules of just like, well, it's there if you want it. Now, in addition to just combats with your support markers, creating task forces and having a throwdown, it does also add a number of these like additional things that you can do, and they're rather interesting. So one is sub patrols. So you can get your torpedo boats, the X boats, which comprise of F boats, I boats, and S boats. Um, you can send those out to a sea area and basically get to ping, plink something for either a removal or you can try to attack it as just this swift sub raider strike. In addition to all the other ways that you might use a submarine support unit marker and use the actual boats that comprise that marker, you can do little neat surprise things and try to hurt somebody. Like maybe you're doing a quick raid to try to knock out a carrier. Right? You can do that kind of thing. Very interestingly, you can also do what's considered a raid, and I actually quite like this idea. I think it's a very cool one where it allows you to kind of get around the support marker uh, constraints, but not in a major way. So that raid is basically like you create a little mini task force. It's not going to be as big as a big like fleet action kind of thing. It has to have at least one carrier in it. And what you do is you create this task force. You do have to have some support markers in your force pool, but you don't actually use it, which is interesting. So it's you've got the capability, but you're not fully utilizing it. And you do this raid. So you send this little task force out to an enemy port, take your pick wherever, and then you're going to roll a die. And under some very specific special circumstances, there are die roll modifiers, but usually not. And you basically have a 1 in 3 chance of getting some kind of result that allows you to attack the enemy with your airstrike factors, or whatever that you have in that task force, which might only be a handful of dice, but it's a freebie shot. If you hit something and you knock something out, if you get lucky, it can be very powerful. But given the low likelihood of the raid succeeding, it doesn't feel like you're going to be doing raids all day, every day. You actually have very limited ability to do a raid. You can do like one raid per turn. So you say, well, I'm going to try something here, and if it doesn't go your way, that might be the end of it. And in some cases, it might enable the defender to actually jump on that raid force. So I think that's actually a very cool complement to just the like, oh, if I'm just replacing the support markers with this battle that really is just going to have the support markers go to the delay box anyway. Like what's different about the system? Well, the raids can do that. The other thing is if you have an actual, like, let's say a carrier strike, you successfully place your carrier strike support marker on an enemy naval base or whatever the case might be. Well, you get to do a version of that raid mechanic, except that you do have a better chance at some die roll modifiers, and you're not limited by the one per turn. You just get to do it, and that can be helpful because what could occur is you catch the enemy in a bad spot where they don't have very many support markers. You get an unopposed CV strike, or maybe you get to displacing it after a combat. That's less likely. And if there are any ships left in that port, that your enemy didn't move to a safer location or whatever the case may be, you get a better chance at that raid strike on those ships without any response, and that could be uh, pretty useful, right? I mean, you just think that like you could knock out some aircraft carriers in port if the enemy's not paying attention to what they're doing, they're sticking their chin out. And the Schiffskrieg rulebook actually has a pretty good example of play covering the British attack on Taranto, over in the European theater, where that's a bunch of Italian ships got messed up pretty badly, and it's a weird thing to get to work and say like World in Flames, but I could definitely see where in this game, like you're going to do this little raid and you're going to hope to get lucky, and if you get lucky, um, you're going to do some additional damage that could be a big difference maker. More likely, nothing's going to happen, and then there's this small chance that that raid group might get caught and banged up. I like that. That's interesting, and you can do that, I think, with air units as well, but it's just a little bit different in terms of basing and all these things. I'm explaining all of this because, and I should also point out there's a commerce raider thing. It's a different sort of raid. So what I was just describing a second ago were like base raids. There's also commerce raiding, which the Germans will certainly aim to do in Totalerkrieg. The Japanese could also look to do it here. That can, again, be this sort of like semi-action. It's a low unit density action that if you succeed, and it's a similar sort of thing as to the base rating in terms of like rolling some dice, figuring out what's going to happen. You can affect the allies by taking something away, either a support unit marker or affect their delay markers, different things like that, or their delay DRMs. That's another thing. I'm not sure how much we'll do of that, but the base raids, the base attacks definitely feel like something I'm going to have to watch out for. And I like that. I mean, but what it's going to do to me playing the game is that all the decisions that would normally be a pretty quick, like, all right, I'm going to play my support marker. Do you play your support marker? Okay. Well, now there's a different calculus to it, and that at least makes it a little more interesting. It adds some meat to the bones of the naval air activities, and just knowing that there's extra stuff that you get to try to do. I very much like that, and that will be a hoot to try to figure out what's the right thing or wrong thing to do in this campaign. If you watch the intermission video I did just previous to this one, I run through the Battle of Midway and a lot of different permutations of that. What really matters in this naval air system when you're playing your markers is, do you have the right complement of ships nearby to use? What kind of task force, of varied unit types are you going to use? How big can the task force be based on your intelligence die rolls? And I liken that a lot to the search die rolls of World in Flames, where like you definitely don't. You're gonna hope you don't end up in a situation where your opponent rolls the best result and you low a crappy result, because it's going to mean they're going to bring more ships to the conflict and be pretty well advantaged in the results of that combat. Numbers matters in this naval system, I'm learning, and there's a lot of other factors there too. So the thought process around all these things starts to come into a uh, much clearer picture, having gone through the midway and just trying to figure out, like, well, based on the historical search rolls, there's not a really great end result for the Battle of Midway, no matter what you do, for the Japanese to have had any better of a time. And this aligns, I think, with history, and what we know about this situation of Midway. Like, the Japanese really needed a better intelligence die roll, and they needed to hope that the Americans got a much worse one that might have given, there's also the fortunes of war cards that matter there in the example of play. But you take the cards away, you give a different intelligence die rolls, you have more Japanese ships actively in the combat, and the Americans less situated. Maybe the Japanese could have come away a bit better there. And so I'm using that lesson learned from that series of replaying the battle over and over again, seeing what different permutations apply, to have my thinking out here and what the Americans can do in terms of force of numbers to work the Japanese down. Talking really quickly about just the if you just look at the map and knowing the base game stuff, all this should look like, okay, we're going to have some combats, maybe we're going to have to land in various places. All of that's going to be to your expectation. But I had to think about, where am I going to put my fleets? I actually had to ask on Board Game Geeks. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what's a good place to put these guys. I don't, this is not my usual game system. I don't know what's the right pick here. Um, so I've done the following. I have put a, a fleet with a complement of cruisers, light carriers, one fleet carrier, and some battleships in Singapore. And that is the Western Fleet to contest the British fleet that I put out here, which has a carrier, some cruisers, and some battleships. I think the Japanese are probably advantaged due to their air, but if we got a night battle, and a night battle is where the air units don't get to participate, and it's just a gunnery fight between cruisers and battleships. Uh, who knows? I mean, I think that'd be an interesting fight, but I wanted to make sure I put something here so the Japanese could support their Burma defenders or attackers, and the British likewise are putting their forces here. So there's sort of a clear contention there. I need to have something so that the British can't run wild on the backfield in the west, jumping right into the Dutch East Indies or wherever. We're going to have to watch that. Then the Japanese have their main fleet. Pretty much, all their really good aircraft carriers, their best ships, are in port in Davao in the southern Philippines. I picked there because there's no base limit for how many units can be there. It's a major port effectively. Um, there's no stacking limit or anything, so I can fit as many of these guys there as I wanted. I just have them stacked up around the port. If I have to stick a beachhead marker in one of these guys, I'll just move the stack around. I can self-manage this pretty well. But that's their main fleet, and I'm expecting to have to use support markers all around this area out here and I'm going to make task forces from the ships that are in Naval. And I have enough there that I can potentially issue multiple task forces out of the ships that are present, and they can get out to the Coral Sea from there. They can get out to Micronesia. They can get out to the Marianas from here. They can get out to the Bonans from here. Um, Maybe not all the ships, but they have a pretty good chance to, because you can always deploy a task force in the naval zone that the port is in, and Davao is a multi-port or a multi-zone port hex, which is important. So I have a lot of flexibility in where I send these guys. Though if I send them up to here, 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 they have to roll speed checks, and for ships with a speed of 6, like this guy, speed of 6, that's a third number, they automatically succeed. They're fast ships. So I can certainly still send out a bunch of fast ships to make a difference and to get to where I need to be. Um, but you know, it's tricky. I could have put them, you know, even further north or something, but you know, where is it better to go? I did have a bunch of ships in truck originally, and someone pointed out that, you know, you're asking to get raided and a port attacked, which was a good point. So I pulled back a little bit, and it's not costing us a whole lot, other than some of our ships may fail speed checks if they don't have a 6. But I was willing to take that. That still gives us a nice central position to work with. And then finally, in the north, I have a small set of units, basically the maximum number that could be used in a scratch defense fleet. So that's something new that we haven't dealt with before. That is in Schiffskrieg, is that you can have a scratch defense fleet marker that you can use to contest the enemy if they go for your home country. So you get the largest task force you can create for that is 7. So I have 7 units up there to defend the home islands to the best of its ability. Maybe not a huge amount of units, but you know, you have to make a decision there on where and how you're going to operate. So that's the thinking. The Japanese don't have a lot of ships. You know, they've already suffered some losses. The Americans, by comparison, have many, many more. The other thing I'll point out in terms of my air units, I've decided to go all in defending the Pacific, because I think we've got the most strategic hexes at risk here. So I have a couple air units on Saipan. I've got a couple air units in Truk. I've got a couple of air units in Rabaul, to just help provide air cover. And if the Allies manage to take those hexes, then I would just be rebasing them somewhere else, I guess, is how that works. Um, you know, not ideal, but who knows? I don't know what else I could have done better. Maybe I would move some of these planes up to Iwo Jima or something. That might be the better move here, but we're going to experiment. We're going to find out. I just want to make sure that in addition to my ships, I'm using my land-based air to provide additional coverage in my shrinking defensive perimeter. So that's the thought for the Japanese. I could have broken up the fleet set here in different locations. I don't know that how much it will really matter. So we're going to try this and see what works. For the Allies, again, you know, there's that British fleet out here. There's a use for that. You know, they're going to be there. If the Japanese didn't have a fleet to contest them, they could be doing strikes down here and start to erode the Japanese easily, with the right force application, and I don't want that to happen. For the Americans, who are enjoying a much greater number of ships, I've got several out here. And some of this is just for logistical purposes, because the basing I'm set for. I have some units in air power in Guadalcanal. I also have some British Air in Port Moresby, so these guys basically helping to take Rabaul. I do have a set fleet here with both fleet carriers and escort carriers and escorts. So that's a task force kind of in action there, that can reach out into the area of concern. I've got sort of this backup fleet in New Caledonia with the idea that I can also send them up. I can also fend off any like last ditch efforts of the Japanese to create chaos by trying to take Townsville or something, so they can kind of cover that, keeping any sneaky stuff from being performed by the Japanese. In our Majuro port, where we have our service marker, which means we can put as many ships as we want, I have two big stacks arranged, that would be, maximum task forces if I wanted to use them that way, that have fleet carriers, escort carriers, cruiser and battleship escorts, sizable fleets that, if used together, could certainly attrit down the main Japanese fleet forces. So they're here. Um, they have the ability to work these sea zones, and you can see my at start troop convoys I put here and here. I'm now threatening just right out of the gate Saipan, Truck, uh, well, Saipan and Truck really, also Wake Island if I wanted to. I'm threatening those locations even right now, and those fleets can directly support those sea zones if they're willing to risk speed checks. And some of their ships are not very fast, so they have to be selective about this. They could push into the Philippine Sea and the Bismarck Sea. If we're going to take the Philippines back, we will eventually have to get in there, but we may want to take Saipan first or something. Who knows? And then lastly, again, this is more of a just in case the Japanese think they're funny. We do have a sort of strategic reserve fleet back here, with an air coverage above Honolulu. So this is a smaller stack that is more based around fast battleships and light carriers that just kind of help protect up there. If need be, they could jump out to Dutch Harbor and support Dutch Harbor. So, with my limited experience with Schiffskrieg, this seemed like a good setup. The idea being, for all sides involved here, the Japanese kind of have the central position. They have a flank exposed out west, maybe, or rather, there's some danger here in the east. But again, our main fleet can react out there and try to stop the Americans. And then we've got against the British, and maybe, I mean, it's still conceivable that if the Japanese can do well in India, Burma, they could make a break into India, and that would be a big problem. So there has to be some naval presence from both sides out here. So that's covered. Japanese just being left for defense and central position, and then the Allies having kind of two defensive reaction task forces in Honolulu and New Caledonia, and then the main sort of strike offensive fleets positioned at Guadalcanal and our service squadron up here in the Marshalls. Now, once the Allies take Rabaul, assuming they do, and I suspect they will, we'll probably move this fleet basing to Rabaul proper, and that extends our basing reach, closer to Palau, which might be good to grab, or eventually make a play for Davao and force the Japanese fleet to relocate and start the campaign to liberate the Philippines. So a lot of possibilities here. I could still be playing some things wrong, or not picking the ideal placement of the air units. That it feels a little hard to judge at the moment, but I think this is a just fine way to get us started here. I will certainly be looking, at our card selections, the historical card selections, to kind of help figure out what I'm going to do. I think following the historical narrative probably works pretty well, other than I might try to take Truck if I feel like I can do it. And the Japanese are just going to do what they can to slow down the Americans, slow down the British, not collapse in China, and hope for the best. A defensive counterpunch once in a while, that may be the best I can hope for. And, Yeah, Schiffskrieg, folks, we're here, and we're using Schiffskrieg on the map that maybe gets the most benefit from utilizing it, but again, adds a lot more decision making questions to consider and worries to contemplate, which will certainly slow down my play for you guys. It won't matter because you're not going to see me, you know, contemplating these things. But I will be playing slower because of these aspects, and we'll see what that does for the game. It's a meaty, at least 13, 15 turn campaign here. Will keep me busy for a little while, and when we get to the other end of it, we should feel pretty comfortable with Schiffskrieg, I hope. So, see you in the next one, guys. In part one, we'll kick things off with the Japanese turn of May, June 1944. And yeah, we'll see you then. So take care. Keep gaming.